Our next speaker has been on a journey, a crazy, wild ride. And I am excited to share with you Candace Owens, who has been a bold proclaimer in a world that wants to not hear the tough stuff spoken out loud. Candace has never been afraid of that, has she? What an incredible opportunity we have to listen to her tell us why she is standing here in front of all of you today. The wild ride, the journey that we are all on, for the glory of God and for the salvation of souls. Would you all do me a big round of applause for Candace Owens, everybody?
Wow, thank you guys. Wow, hello. My Catholic family. Thank you. All right, well, let's get started. So I was asked to speak tonight about my journey, and it's a huge question. People always want to know, like, what made you become baptized, convert into the Catholic faith? I was Protestant my entire life, and everybody's journey is different, and everybody's journey, or at least for me, has been very strange, and I'm very excited to share it with you. And I think you guys have probably figured out that my journey really was through politics to faith. Not a typical journey, but that is really where it began for me, and my life has had so many twists and turns. And so I'm going to take you very quickly through the political journey, which I think everybody was very aware of. And I guess I'll kind of take you through a marathon of sorts of my life. And so, you know, the story of Candace Owens is I've had the same character throughout my entire life. Maybe not the same ideas, but I've had the same character. And so it's interesting when I go on all these college campuses and when I speak at events and I get asked a question and people, you know, wonder sort of where did my courage come from to confront some of these issues head on. And now that I have children, I can say I do think some people are just sort of born that way. And for my parents, I was a tough one because I think most kids are sort of content when parents say to them, you know, do this because I said so, or do this or else Santa's not going to come. You know, the easy stuff that you get to say to toddlers and it works. And I was just one of those kids that was like, well, then you tell him not to come to Santa. And that's very frustrating for a parent. You're like, you're 3, you know, could you just clean your room? You don't have to make this difficult, because it wasn't that I was angry. I just always wanted someone to explain things to me rationally. I didn't like sort of the arbitrary authority. I came out not liking arbitrary authority. I would be happy to clean my room, but I don't want the reason for me to clean my room is because some guy is going to come down a chimney, somehow get skinny, and drop off some presents. Like, that didn't make sense to me, even at the age of 3. And I was fortunate that my grandfather was a huge part of my life growing up, and my grandfather and my grandmother were incredibly faithful. And as a part of our morning breakfast routine, during my formative years, I lived with my grandfather. He would make sure that we read the Bible every single morning. And of course, during those first miles of your life, you're not really understanding things, and you're picking up things here and picking up things there, and things are mostly caught and not taught. And my grandfather just had this breakfast routine where we'd go through the Bible and he'd challenge us about Scripture. And for me, really, I just thought, I really want to beat my sisters and get the right answer, right? I'm one of 4. And so when he'd go around and he'd sort of rank us according to our answers by giving us a mug, and we'd figured out who won for the day in terms of answering Scripture. But then I think when you get into, I would describe this in the marathon as mile 7 of your life, you are suddenly, and I think for me this was in middle school into high school, quite embarrassed. I was so embarrassed of my faithful grandparents constantly talking about God and the Bible, and like, I just want to be cool, you know? I want to be secular. I want to get along with everybody that's at school and not think about faith, and that is just sort of the world coming at you, and for whatever reason, you know, you can't be cool if you're talking about Scripture. You can't be cool if you're Christian. And so it was so natural for me to sort of pull away from my grandparents, pull away from my faith, more importantly. And I sort of still kept up the same Candace Owens spirit. And this is a true story. There's one high school teacher that I still keep in touch with, and he's messaged me and said, you know, Candace, if there was anybody that I could have picked in high school that would be doing what they're doing and making it as far as you have as a public figure, it would have definitely been you, because you drove me crazy. Poor Mr. White. And part of the reason was because I didn't like arbitrary authority. I just wanted to be able to think, even if my ideas weren't right. And I specifically, he recalls that having given me a test, and it was one of these tests that were on World War II, you know, the answers the questions are supposed to be easy. You're supposed to just give a simple answer. And there was this one question, and it was, you know, why did we have to drop the atom bomb on Japan? And most of the kids just wrote the answer, and the answer is always because we needed to end World War II. And of course, Candace couldn't do that, and so I just rose my hand and told the teacher that I didn't like his question. He's like, you know, Candace, what do you mean you don't like the question? And I said, well, you know, this kind of implies the answer. This kind of implies that we had to drop the bomb on Japan, and I'd rather think through that and see if I agree with that, and maybe I do, but I want to actually be allowed to use my brain, and maybe I think we shouldn't have dropped it. When you just imply that we had to, you know, I don't like that. And so that really was sort of, you know, mile 7 of my life, and very sure of myself and very certain and wanting to be a thinker. And it wasn't really until around, I would say, mile 15 of the marathon that things got a little bit complicated because, you know, I'd gone through university and I was a liberal, as any person that is fortified by the public school system comes out. If you've been properly public school catechized, then you know that you should be a liberal, you should be on the left, especially as a black woman. I understood all of these things. And then I was sort of met with the real world. And while everything sounded so pretty growing up, that everything could be free, then I started understanding what taxes were when they were actually applied. And I was not politically inclined at all, and I was just working really hard to try to pay off my student loans, and this was the giant monkey on my back. Like, how am I going to actually make money and pay off these ridiculous loans? I mean, I'm 6 figures in student loan debt, and I have no idea how I'm going to pay that off with the salary that I'm making. And then lo and behold, in 2015, this was one of the moments where Donald Trump came down the escalator, and I looked at him and I looked at his wife and I said, oh, no, this guy cannot become president of the United States. No, not me. I will not allow this to happen. And I remember thinking that, and they probably could have gotten me to think that forever if the media wasn't really hyperbolic in trying to sell why we shouldn't vote for him, because if they had just said, listen, this guy's on reality TV, Obama speaks so clearly and he articulates so well. Why would we want this guy who says you're fired? I would have been like, yeah, exactly. That's the right answer. And then, you know, I was looking up and they weren't saying that. They were saying so much more horrific things, that he was a racist, that he was a sexist, that he was a misogynist, that if he was elected, black people were going to be put back in slave chains. That was really the pitch to black America. Like, do you want to go back to the South and be slaves? If your answer is no, you cannot vote for this man. I think for the first time I sort of just went, okay, that's weird. Like, I don't want him to be president, but also, like, this seems very extreme, the rhetoric here. And I started asking myself a question, like, is it possible that they're doing this a lot? I mean, I don't pay attention to politics, but this just feels like emotional engineering. And so I resolved to just sort of watch a Trump speech and actually hear what he had to say. And he gave one of his sort of Trump elevator pitches and was sort of like rattling off statistics about black America and blah, 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 blah. And then he said, you know, black America, what do you have to lose? Just take a chance on me. Everything's not good. And the statistics were accurate about the crime rates and about the poverty in black America. And I went, you know, decent enough pitch. And then I was quite shocked when all of the media that I had trusted, actually, I had learned to trust these sources. I went to school for journalism. I was told that if you want the truth, you go to New York Times, you go to CNN. I watched them spin his speech into something that he just completely never said, again, with that point that they were trying to engineer this response. And this, to me, was a big moment. And I said, you know, I think I want to do something about this. I think I actually want to just speak to people about this sort of race-baiting game. And I started asking myself, like, is it possible that I'm actually a conservative? And I took and this really gets to mile 18. Mile 18 was hard. I can laugh about it now, but let me tell you something. when you are in your mid-20s and suddenly you start to realize that up is down and down is up. Like the people that I thought were racist and backwards and wanted to put me back in chains actually kind of just believe in free markets and capitalism and are being lied about on the mainstream media. You go through this period of cognitive dissonance where you're like, am I crazy? This can't be right. Like, am I about to open an article on Fox News? And you're so ashamed. You hide it from your friends and family. You do this like in your bedroom, you scroll, and you're like, I'm just gonna see what they're saying, these crazy racists. And the more that I did that, I saw this whole other world that I had been completely lied about. And I just thought, wow, how could I have been so severely propagandized? And then that cognitive dissonance transformed into this thirst for real knowledge. And I decided I was going to start reading all of these authors who I had dismissed as, Uncle Toms and coons and race traders. Man, the joke was really going to be on me in a couple of years, as I was going to be called all of those names. And I started reading Dr. Ben Carson and Clarence Thomas, and Thomas Sowell really was for me like lights on, because he really presented the economic arguments in a way that just made so much sense. And I said, okay, my late teen, I'm going to start a YouTube channel, and I'm just simply going to say that I'm black and I'm conservative, and that's it. And that was, wow, the media completely came after me. They attacked me. They called me all of those things that I had formerly called Dr. Ben Carson and Thomas Sowell. And I went, wow, well, you know what? It's okay, because I have finally arrived at the truth. And at that mile 18, my truth that I had finally arrived at, that I was convinced was the truth, was just, it's about free markets. They don't want people to have an opportunity. We have to defend free markets. We have to defend capitalism. And then I started working with Turning Point USA, and I hit the ground running. And suddenly, I'm running around with so many evangelical Christians that are in the political space as well. And I'm going, yes, and this feels good, because I've been missing this faith part, this component of faith that I walked away from. And suddenly I'm going back to church again. And this is great, and it's amazing. And there's singing, and there's like concerts. It feels like a Justin Bieber concert. This is great. This is awesome. Who wouldn't want this? We need to spread the good word. And I get to talk about my faith journey on stage to college students and make them aware that the truth, the real truth, is that they just don't want us to have free markets. And if we don't have free markets, then we're all just going to be enslaved. Socialism, that was my big truth, that socialism was evil. And then, this thing happened. And I sort of looked up and I realized that very quickly the media can create another religion. And I should call this a form of paganism. You get the kids and they're crying over climate change, and you see it in their eyes. They believe in this thing. They think they're atheists, but they're not atheists, these kids, no. They just have misplaced their faith into something that is man-made, and they're skipping school because the planet's going to be over. And one of these pagan gods was created on the day that George Floyd died. My life is good. People are kind of going, okay, she's going to be around. And, the way people were feeling so impassioned about this, the smart advice would have just been to not, just don't question this particular narrative. And, Black Americans are super upset. But I just knew that there were some lies that were being told. And, I made a conscious decision to present some other facts that the media was rather mistakenly omitting, or very intentionally omitting, as they were establishing this as the new pagan god. And the video that I published on my Facebook, speaking about the history of George Floyd, who he was as a human being before this tragic ending, no doubt a tragic ending, talking about the drug addiction, was the most viral video I've ever done. 100 million views worldwide. And then the media really came for me. I mean, you wouldn't believe the attacks. It was unbelievable. But at the same time, despite the media smearing me and maiming me and caricaturing me, there was also just so many people that came to me and said, thank you, Candace, for saying this. I've been fearful to talk about this or talk about any facts, because we are all being so seized by this race narrative. And I thought, this is it. This is it. This is the big one. I have finally landed on the truth. And the truth is that the government wants to divide us, and it's worse than that. They want to attack our family. That was the final truth. I thought, this is it. And so la-di-da, I survived it, and there's now suddenly this clear understanding to me that what I have to fight for beyond anything else, above everything, is family. At this time, I met my husband. We're having our first child. Life is great. I've got a show now that's 5 days a week, and I'm speaking about the importance of the nuclear family, taking people through the Marxist agenda of BLM. I'm doing a documentary explaining to people, why it is that Marxists hate the family so much, this threat. It proposes a threat to the state, a strong nuclear family, and we've got to make sure that we get that. But that wasn't really the big truth. This is kind of like the last 4 miles of the marathon, and things are good. And then this being drawn more to the concept of family, and I'm recognizing that my husband, I'm a Protestant, but he's a Catholic. And at this same time, he is just being drawn more and more and more into the church, and he's going to Mass every day. Can you imagine? I'm going on Sundays to a nice concert. This guy's looking, he's got objects in his hand, his whole office has transformed. Like, what is going on with you, man? What's going on? And I was just curious, It was more the mystery of the side of my husband that I didn't quite understand. What are you getting up so early for? To go to Mass? You just went there. You were just there. Just gonna go on Sunday, just check in, And I'm starting to have these conversations with him, and I'm listening, but, not really comprehending. And he says to me, I start prodding to him about his faith journey and trying to understand why he made the decision to convert into the Catholic faith when he was at university. He studied theology, he decided to convert, and I'm starting to really get into the story to see what's driving him. And he says something to me that now rings in my head. He said, to become a student of history is to become a Catholic. So, yeah, what was he saying? Like, I wasn't a student of history? I went to public school. I took history. And so because I was interested in understanding my husband's faith and what was drawing him further into it, I started asking all of the questions and came up with all of the things. Well, you guys worship Mary. Yeah, it's not good. You shouldn't do that. What are all these objects here? You shouldn't be doing that. The Bible speaks against idolatry. You guys have heard all of the talking points over and over again. I'm now giving this to my husband. I said, but listen, in the spirit of healthy debate, I will set up a time for you to come on my show. My husband never does any publicity unless it is to speak about his faith. And to have a debate with Allie Stuckey. Known her for years, and she's so lovely. And I just really want this to be kind of like the great debate because, I think you guys are well matched. And she's going to speak on behalf of Protestants, and then you can speak on behalf of Catholics. And, good luck. I'm just going to be in the middle and watching this thing. And I was listening, and I thought my husband was making some pretty sound points. And then after this debate, and I promise you guys this is the truth, and I have to pull this up on my phone, in the comments section, this is when the beginning of the rest of my life began. An unknown human being named Jose, who somewhere in the world is probably going, this began with me, wrote this under the debate regarding Protestants. Shallow doctrinal talking points just hide the unequivocal American dislike for royal authority. That's what's really going on. The idea that you can make your own denomination with the doctrinal tidbits that you like is quintessential to American freedom. Anybody can be president, anybody can be a pastor. Evangelical Christianity really is classic Americana in a religious costume. The fact that there are thousands of mutually incompatible Protestant denominations proves Protestantism as a whole cannot be the truth. It was politically convenient for the Northern European powers when it popped up to rival Rome, and then it adapted beautifully to the character of American society. Protestantism is more interesting sociopolitically than theologically. Ouch. It was the seed. It was the seed that planted, and I just went, oh my, is this classic Americana? Is this everything that I say about the left? Is this sort of like my truth, my truth, my truth, as opposed to the truth? And I just knew, when I read that comment, I knew that Protestantism for me was over. And I began to re-examine my brain of thinking about why I did say all of these things about Catholics. Like, where did it come from? Why is it that everybody who has an issue with Catholics is saying the exact same cookie-cutter thing? Clearly, these aren't our ideas. So who's instilling them in our heads? And then I thought about everything I had said on stage for years about the public education system, creating little Marxists, the public education system intentionally making Black Americans and white Americans fight and believe in this sort of race narrative. It's being instilled in us, I said, They're lying to us intentionally. These classrooms have become propaganda centers. And then I started going, well, if everything that I learned in school and thus far, I've recognized as a lie. They're pushing feminism. It's all anti-family. They're pushing transgenderism. They're pushing all of these isms. What if what I learned about the Catholic faith was wrong? And isn't that weird that I go through the public school system and I come out being anti-Catholic? It's very strange. And I started wondering about history, real history, not the public education kind. And what I came across was a lot of questions, really a lot of questions that people didn't even want me raising. I went back, ironically, to that nuclear bomb that we dropped on Japan and learned a little bit more about that and learned that we dropped it in Nagasaki, 300 yards away from praying Catholics, destroyed the burgeoning Catholic city of Nagasaki, wiped out the burgeoning Catholic city of Nagasaki. I'm not saying that it's a conspiracy, I'm just saying that it's weird that it wasn't mentioned. And then I started wondering, why was I told that these were the Dark Ages? You mean the Catholic ages? Is that what we're really talking about? And then I started to learn more about the Spanish Inquisition. Oh, those evil Catholics. And then I started learning the truth about the Crusades, and I started wondering, how could it be that every time I learn about Catholic history, something is being intentionally omitted, misrepresented, with the end result being in school that I am supposed to walk away thinking that Catholics are evil. And that sort of made me desire and thirst to know more. Maybe I'm being crazy again. Maybe it's just that happens to be the circumstance that whoever's printing the textbook seems to have this strange focus on misrepresenting the Catholic faith. And it's funny when things happen, when I got baptized, and following that point, I then went into a period of study again at the Brompton Oratory, and I wanted to ask every question. And as I was in London, and Father Julian and Father Rupert were answering everything, and they really explaining to me, and they were quite miffed by the whole thing, just like, what goes on in America? Like, do you guys know anything about your own history? I realized, wow, the Catholics really have just been waiting. They've just been waiting for people to learn history beyond the progressive neo-history that we are being taught in the classroom. And I was fascinated, and I felt that a fire had been lit inside of me. And so I did the thing that every excited Catholic does, jumped into the space with fervor, said to my husband, yeah, sure, let's do that pilgrimage you've been asking me about. How many of you guys have been on a Catholic pilgrimage before? Okay, there we go. How many of you guys have done charter? A lot more, yes. Yeah, even the Catholics are like, are you crazy? Yep. 66 miles walking. And it's because I had no time to think that I said yes immediately. I said, yeah, that sounds great. When you're baptized Catholic, let's do it. And so I'll explain to you guys, for those of you that are not aware of how that works. You show up in Paris, and you essentially the night before, you kind of meet with your group. That's 50,000 people that are going to walk 66 miles across 2.5 days with little more than whatever you can carry, your knapsack. And Father Witos, ours was the Australian U.S. group, and Father Witos led it, and everybody has a priest. Every group has a priest, about 20 people per group, and you do Latin prayers. On the first day, I guess I was back at what I would describe in my Catholic journey at mile zero. I didn't really know anything, but I was excited to be there. And I was concerned that the groups would move too slowly. If whoa, we have to walk with them. What if we want to walk ahead? My husband's like, it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. Man, I was so wrong. I mean, right after you have the Mass to begin, at the center of Paris. Then you start walking, and in those first 7 miles, I realized that these French Boy Scouts are built different. They are built different. They are like super athletes, and I realized I'm going to be run walking this entire thing. And we've got the St. Joseph flag, and they're marching with it, and they just Latin prayers the entire time. I didn't know a single Latin prayer as we began. I think I now speak fluent Latin, so anybody who wants to just jump in to anything, and they're just marching. I mean, just like Spartans going to war. Salve Regina. I mean, it's amazing. And the first 7 miles, I felt good. I was like, this is good. First day, you're going 28 miles. But I was like, you know what, I got this. It's walking. How bad could this be? And I felt great about that. The first 7 miles, you take a quick little break, have some water. And then you get to mile 15, and it's a lunch break. And by a lunch break, it's a giant field. It's burning, blistering hot. And you just kind of sit on the grass, and whatever you were able to pack, you can have. They also throw around bread boxes. You just see these cardboard boxes filled with bread, and everyone kind of diving into it because you're so hungry after 15 miles. But truly, I was so hot and exhausted, I couldn't even physically eat. I was like, if I even look at some of this stuff, I'm going to throw up. And my husband and the French Boy Scouts were whipping out like cheese and croissants and salami. And there were little Boy Scout knives. And then they had this thing called pork butter. Ugh. And I'm like, you're not going to eat that. My husband just dipped right into the pork butter. He was doing great. He was totally fine. And then you continue on, and you're like, okay, I'm okay. But right around mile 18 is when you're going, uh-oh. Like, I am mentally and physically, like, I am so proud of myself for having made it to mile 18. But there's 10 miles left. Like, 10 miles left. And I don't know if I can do this. And right then, it started to torrential downpour. Torrential downpour. And so now, you're moving at a sloth's pace because it's all just mud. You're going through the wood, and you're completely soaked. And at this point, you start seeing people start tapping out. People are on the side. They're under those, like, aluminum-looking blankets. The EMTs are running. There are people that you're like, oh, are they going to be okay? And then, of course, the French Boy Scouts just running back and forth with them in stretchers. They're just, I'm like, how are you guys running? I mean, it's just whistling to each other, signaling, and I am just like, okay, I'm just gonna focus and try to stay in my own mind and just really, I got to get past this 18th mile. And I am telling you, the last break is at the 22-mile mark, and I'm just going, I can't stop, honey. You know, I quite literally do not think I can move anymore. And I look over at my husband, and I'm having like end-of-life thoughts, you know? Like, I'm wondering, like, if our will is in order, and I'm thinking about the kids, and I kind of want to cry, and I'm just like, I can't physically take another step. I cannot do that. And I look at my husband, and he's also similarly in this thought. You can just see he's really thinking. And I say, honey, just thinking about the kids. What are you thinking about? And he was just like, could you imagine doing this in full suited armor in medieval times? And I realized that I had married a French Boy Scout by mistake. By mistake. I just looked at him, I'm like, and he says to me that he got a text message from one of the priests back at home, and our priest said to him, like, has she divorced you yet? And I want to be clear, not for a single second throughout that entire pilgrimage did I see an attorney's office, or I would have been in there. But we were in the countryside, so we were stuck with one another. And as we got to the last 4 miles, all uphill, I remember looking at Father Witos, and he's just got a cheery Australian smile on his face. And I'm like, honey, we just have to keep going, because if I stop, I'm physically just going to fall apart. And I said, I'm going to be honest with you, Father, I feel like I'm going to die. And it was just the biggest smile on his face. Father Witos said to me, do you know somebody died last year on that hill? Not a joke. We saw the cross of somebody died. She's like, I couldn't believe this. And at this point, I'm going, should I just be Protestant? Like, is this like... That's what the Catholics do, you know? But I made it. And I'm telling you, when you see when you see camp in the distance and you start to see everybody flooding in and oh my gosh, your mindset, you're going, I never thought I could do this. I pushed myself mentally, I pushed myself physically. We did this. And then, I remember getting into bed that night and just the very last thought that came in my brain was, you have to do this all again tomorrow. And that really has been my thought process, just realizing as I jump into this next thing, realizing my life was great, Now I've realized this, and it's the truth, the capital T truth. And the capital T truth is that it was never about an attack on Trump or free markets or Marxism or race, What's always been going on is that it has been an attack on Christ. It truly has been. And it is so tempting not to dive into that. It's so tempting to say, life is great. These are just the one thing you just don't have to talk about. And you can keep everything, your career. You can keep, the same set of political friends. You just don't veer too much into speaking about Jesus Christ. Don't recognize that big truth, the comfort of being able to stay there. Your life's great. Husband, you are happy. The kids are happy. Just don't start speaking about Jesus Christ. And it's so tempting to have kept things the way that they were. But the more that I thought about it and the more that I saw it and the more that I studied history, I knew that for me, there could be no other option. And I knew that it was going to cost me pain. I knew that for everything that I had done in my career, in a way, God was saying to me, that was only the first day. I'm going to have to do it all over again. And I'm going to have to endure the media attacks, and I'm going to have to endure the smears and the libels and the 3,500 emails that they received trying to stop me from speaking at this event. 3,500 troll emails trying to terrorize people from hosting me at this event. And when I learned that was happening, I chuckled. I said, oof, they don't know Catholics. And so I don't know where this is going, but I rely on just the feeling that I felt on that third day. Once the last day is 16 miles, and I cannot explain to you what overcomes you when you see those spires in the distance. And you're all listening to the priest tell the story of the Charter Cathedral, how another one of these accidents during World War II, bad intel, they were told, the Americans, to shell it, shell it, bring it down, because there's Nazis inside. And gratefully, there was a Christian American general who just said, I just don't know why I feel like that's bad intel. And he volunteered himself to go across enemy lines, to walk into the cathedral, and to ring the bell if there were no Nazis. And they went over, and they saw that there was no Nazis inside, and so that cathedral still stands today. Because, it's an incredible story. And I'll never forget the feeling when you can feel nothing. I mean, by that third day, your hair hurts. Have you ever sprained your hair? Your hair hurts. And then suddenly you realize why the Latin Mass, when all of the French citizens in this tiny little town come out and they're holding their babies and they've got their family and they join you in prayer. In the Latin prayer, and you can't help but to be overcome by emotion. You can't help but to understand why it is that it is supposed to be one holy apostolic church. It has been that, just knowing that finally I've landed on the only fight that actually matters. Everything else is auxiliary, everything else is subsidiary, and I know that feeling that I felt is, I don't know when it will come, and we're going to get through this trying time, and I think I realized truly that I had become a Catholic when I went through all of this persecution, and I was so happy. I was Father Witos. I was like, yeah. And my husband's like, you got 20,000 articles being written about us all around the world. You know, I think somebody died on the side of the road. I mean, I'm just smiling, going, yeah, this is amazing. Because to be persecuted, man, that is the story of Christianity. And I am so blessed, and I want to say to you all that I am so grateful, because I emerge here so humble, just the humility of understanding that the Catholics around the world have lifted me up in prayer. The Catholics around the world were praying for me before I even was a Catholic, and they found out my husband was one. They said they set their timers. They knew that it was only a matter of time. And I am so grateful to each and every one of you for lifting me and my family up in prayers. We are at the beginning of day 2, but I promise you that in the end, we win. Thank you guys so much for having me.